Welcome in, everyone. Christian Attraction here with special guest Nick Rondo of Jayhawks Daily. Nick, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Christian. I appreciate it.
So the Kansas Jayhawks just won the Big 12 every year for like forever, and we're a top like getting a 4 seed or a 3 seed was like a disaster. And then the last 2 years, no Sweet 16. You losing the first round last year to Arkansas, and the Hunter Dickinson. I mean, obviously he was super productive, but it didn't work as well as it was supposed to. So now Darryn Peterson's here. There's some very interesting pieces, some under the radar freshmen transfers, but it's all about Darryn Peterson. So set this up for me, Nick. What does Darryn Peterson coming to Kansas mean? And how is Bill Self feeling after a couple down years for Kansas's standards?
Yeah, I love how you brought up Hunter Dickinson as he is what identified this Kansas team for the past couple of years. And it had highs, it had a lot more lows. So Darryn Peterson is the fresh face that the Jayhawks fans needed. Bill Self has said it himself. This is the best freshman he's ever gotten. So that includes, Josh Jackson, the likes of Andrew Wiggins, and everything like that. But it really is going to be, from everything I'm hearing, this team lives and dies by Darryn Peterson. Is that too much for an 18-year-old? People are saying he plays like a 25-year-old, but we're only going to find out in the Big 12 season. I mean, Houston has taken the reins of the prior Kansas reign, I would say, and it's going to be relying on an 18-year-old, but it seems like that's going to be pretty common for the conference with Devonta at BYU.
For people who haven't had the chance to watch Darryn Peterson, explain why he's so good.
So I just think nobody has seen such a mature 18-year-old in a couple of years. And that sounds kind of, almost fake to a point, but because Anthony Edwards was so polished, but it was at Georgia, kind of a smaller team. When you've got the spotlight at Kansas that Darryn Peterson has, and he's just been built for this moment with his maturity level. It's a 3-level scorer, and I mean a complete 3-level scorer. He can absolutely destroy you with either hand on the drive. He can pull up and shot over, 35, 36% from three for his couple years in high school. And it's just when you are seeing the likes of these journalists, Bill Simmons, John Rothstein, saying this guy is going to be more than just, a number one overall pick in the NBA draft. He could make an Olympic team in a couple years. He's just going to come in with that type of presence because he's a two-way player. And that's something, at a high school level, you can judge it so much, but in the Big 12 conference, he's going to get some big tests.
The other key piece, there's a lot of key pieces, but I want to talk about Flory next, just as the guy returning who probably could have gotten drafted if he left last year. Didn't have a huge role last year, but when he was in, just the defensive prowess as just a shot blocker and a guy who can be a lob threat really stood out. So Flory in a bigger role, what do you expect out of him this year?
Flory in a huge role. I mean, no other way to put it, really. He is thrust into this, the top returner from last year, averaging a whopping 6 points. Yes, he did lead the team in blocks as well, but he's going to have to really take an offensive load and a big rebounding load. This is a smaller team this year. He's at 6'10", a bigger wingspan. At that center, below him at 6'7". So he's going to be having to get a lot of boards, but Bill Self said he learned a lot from Dickinson, and we may say what we will about Dickinson, but he was a 20 and 10 guy, 20 and 12 in a lot of years. And, he had shaky passing, but he was an efficient passer. And apparently Bill says he is picking up exactly where Hunter left off in that offensive creativity department. But the real question is he going to develop between, more than just 10 feet out? Can he, work well? And I think it will work well with the Darryn Peterson pick and roll. And it's going to be, a lot of question marks early on and a lot of big tests early on. Their non-conference is, I'm assuming, something we'll probably get into. But I mean, it's a big pick and roll piece, 2-man game between Darryn Peterson and Flory. And if they're not working well early, I'm going to be shaking in my boots for the Big 12 games.
When you have a mobile lob threat like Flory and you have a guard like Darryn, I feel like we are going to see a lot of that pick and roll combo. But for me, Bill Self in Kansas has been synonymous with a post big that you want to play through as much as you can, whether it's been Dickinson or Azubuike or David McCormack. There was the weird KJ Adams year where he was the center, which shows me Bill Self is willing to adapt to his personnel. So 2-part question. One, is Flory a guy who has some post moves now that they're going to give him those kind of touches, or these freshmen, Bryson Tiller, Paul Mbaya, these other bigs, are they guys that can bring that element?
So I think it's going to be a little bit of each. People forget Flory was that McDonald's All American. I remember him balling out kind of in that game, and that was the only guy Kansas got for that year. And unlike many years, because they're transfer loaded rosters, but I don't think we're going to see a Flory masterclass like Hunter Dickinson in the post. I think we're going to see explosions for him, 12 to 14 points or something. But I love how you brought up Bryson Tiller. He's a guy who I'm expecting to really bring something this year. He had the ankle injury that kind of hindered him, but he enrolled, last year in January early just to get into Bill's system. And, Bill said he's bounced back incredible from the left ankle. And he was a top 25 guy in the previous recruiting class, before that injury, and it kind of made him fall a little bit. But his biggest thing is he thinks he's this magical wing and the picture perfect body of a player, a 6'10" player. He's got like 11-inch hands, a standing 9-foot reach. This is a prototypical, stretch four that we can use. And he's untouchable within 18 feet. He's got a great stroke, but is he going to get that early? And that's the problem. Is I don't think he's going to have a lot of opportunity early, with Flory and like I will probably mention later is Trey White at that 4. But we can expect a lot of offensive talent from him. And then Mbia, he's got experience in the French Pro League, but is that going to translate? And I think he's going to be more of just that strict defensive 5 who can maybe help out at the rim, but not much offensive post game from him, I'm expecting.
Let's talk about Trey White, who you just mentioned. Last year at Illinois, played really well and was a guy who, started at USC, goes to Louisville, which was obviously just a complete mess under Kenny Payne, and goes to Illinois, and I really liked what I saw him. He played really well down the stretch specifically, too. What do you expect of him as a 4-man here on both ends of the floor?
Yeah, with him as a 4-man, again, and I got to keep going back to what Bill's saying. Bill's our guy at KU, and we got to keep trusting him. Is that Trey is one of the most coachable guys he's coached in a while. Given the fact that I don't want to throw shade at our prior AJ Store, but when you go 7 schools in 7 years, you've got to be coachable. And I'm not saying that he wasn't super coachable, but we saw it not working out. The scheme fit, his comfortability, his confidence was not there. Trey White has gone into each of these programs, like you said, the Louisville kind of dumpster fire, but his strong Illinois team last year. And he played his role perfectly. And it's going to be that slashing kind of Swiss Army knife wing. But we're going to need a lot from him on the boards, I think, to help Flory out, because, we know Flory is going to be getting a lot of rebounds, but Trey White is, he's 6'7". He's a little bit undersized to be playing in a tough, beastly conference. Seeing him going against Joshua Jefferson of Iowa State, I don't see him winning that battle all the time. So he's going to have to stretch the floor a lot. Darryn Peterson's going to be driving in that paint, and he's going to be ready to shoot. And, we saw an uptick in his 3-point percentage last year. He got up to 33% for Illinois. But we're going to need to see a similar number, if not better, if we're going to compete. I expect this to be a run and gun team, which is not typically a Bill Self squad.
Melvin Council and Jaden Dawson, a pair of 6'4" seniors coming over from the Atlantic 10. Council from St. Bonaventure and Jaden from Loyola. I watched Melvin more, 15, 5, and 4 last year, and he's really athletic. He's exciting to me. Don't know as much about Jaden, but tell me about these guys and if you expect them to be able to make this jump to the Big 12.
Yeah, and this, I don't want to say boy crying wolf, but I have more confidence in this guard than I did in Timberlake years ago. And I think it's because, and the thing is we've had those high-ranked transfer guards, and they just haven't panned out. And, the key with this one is these ones, exactly, they're going under the radar. Our highest ranked transfer was Trey White, I think, at ESPN's number 77 ranking. The other 2 didn't get in the top 100. And when Darryn Peterson is saying Melvin Council and him will be one of the best backcourts in the country, there's a sense of belief in that, just because, he's had a lot of experience, played a couple years at JUCO as well. But he's also, he's kind of been the guy. So if need be, if Darryn needs a break, he can rely on him a little bit. He had about 14 attempts last year for the Bonnies. And I just see him kind of picking up where we know Darren's going to have a big offensive load. Melvin Council is a great defender, 2 steals and just an intuitiveness that, he can pick off passes, loves to run in the transition. And, I'm very excited about him. And with Jaden Dawson, it's, I see the biggest comparison for last year's team would be Rylan Griffin. And it's the 3-point specialist. He's our only one shooting over 37%. And it's, Jaden Dawson, he was the guy kind of at Chicago. He was getting a lot of attempts. Rylan Griffin was a 3-point specialist at Alabama. We brought him to Kansas and tried to do the same thing. I don't see it didn't help. He was too timid. He wasn't effective. And I think Jaden Dawson can be, because he'll have that confidence instilled with him. You're our best shooter. Go out there and shoot. And, we need that. If we've seen the downfalls of the Kansas team over the past couple of years, it's been Dickinson ruin us in the drop coverage game, and it's been no 3-point shooting. So Jaden Dawson is going to have a big year for us to really succeed behind the arc.
I don't want to touch on it too much, but like Timberlake forgetting how to shoot was just like really mind boggling. And just like you said, the word timid you used, like, I know you were talking about Rylan there, but like that's what Nick was. And then Store,
Yeah.
like you said, is 7 schools in 7 years kind of guy. That was like kind of an ego and fit thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
The Rylan Griffin not working out thing, I still don't really understand how that happened, because he's like kind of the guy that you could put him on any team because of his shooting ability and not needing the ball. And I don't know, that just has me a little nervous about, or I don't know if nervous is the right word, but like, why was Kansas missing so much on these guys? And what does that say about Bill's evaluation or his ability to get guys to get along? And that's why, stay with me here, that's why I'm so in on like Darryn Peterson. Like, it's so clearly Darryn Peterson's team,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it being so clearly Hunter Dickinson's team, it's like it's harder to build that, even if maybe a few years ago it was easier to build around a big guy like that. I just think this maybe there is more cohesion. I just feel like it's less likely that you're going to swing and miss on some of these transfers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I'll ask this question: do you, in the past, we'll say 15 years of a Kansas team, who has the best player always been a center? I think the only time you could say that would be Hunter Dickinson's years. McCormick was a secondary piece. Sheck Diallo, these guys are secondary pieces.
As a
secondary scorers.
Buki, but
As
the
a
guard
Buki,
play was so high
it
level.
was high level, absolutely. But that's the thing, is that's what we need. It's Dickinson was the focal point, and so everyone knew exactly how to play against that. The biggest thing that Bill said, this team compared to last, and I'll definitely touch on the Ryland point and the transfer, is that this team is the unknown. People knew what they were going with. Their big swing in the transfer portal era, right when it started, was Hunter Dickinson. And they didn't put a team around him that worked well. And, he went for a couple options. But the biggest thing that Bill tried to do, I think, was to have the transfers that would build for a couple of years. And it never worked out. They didn't last more than a year every time. These guys, he's going for veteran experience. These are 1-year eligibility guys that they've already, been mature enough to get that point where we know what we're getting out of you. This is exactly what we want. And it's yes, it's a big risk. It's a big unknown. And I agree. Rylan Griffin will probably have, an excellent rest of, his eligibility. AJ Store's already going to be doing it well at Ole Miss, probably. They just didn't work with Bill Self's system. And the biggest thing is we're getting back to basics. And this is something I'd love to talk about, is we're going back to big recruiting. And this freshman class has got me excited, rather than plug and play, transfer couple year eligibility guys that just didn't work well for Kansas. And, maybe it's also, yes, the big impact that Hunter Dickinson had clogging up the paint. He was a 20-10 guy. It helped, but we really, we just couldn't overcome from the guard play. With DeJuan had limitations. KJ Adams had limitations. They were not guys that were going to work. And in the real transfer era, you got to cut bait earlier. Whereas Bill Self, he's a loyal guy. I wouldn't be surprised if El Marco was starting, game 1 of the season. He loves his guys who stay in his system.
We'll get to El Marco in a second, but the next guy I want to ask about is Cole Rosario, a guy who the drum beat is building, the shooting, the speed, the athleticism. This is a guy who reclassified, and I heard he might be a starter. So tell me about Cole Rosario and if this hype is warranted.
I mean, again, warranted. Game 1, game 2, we'll see. But I am so excited for this team because of Cole Rosario. And Big 12 Media Day came out the other day, and Bill said for the Louisville exhibition game, Cole's going to be starting, and we'll see how it plays after that. But as of right now, Cole Rosario is a starter for the Kansas Jayhawks. From, preparing to go into his senior year to reclassifying last June and being a starter for the Kansas Jayhawks, people thought he was going to have the Furphy arc. He didn't start for the first 10 to 12 games. And, he kind of took over later on when conference play took over. And Cole's doing it right ahead. And I think it's just because of potential. Yes. El Marco, again, I have to bring it up. He calls him Captain America, Steve Rogers. He goes, I could do this all day. He's so bouncy. He's so, energetic. And I think a lot of it, yes, it's the youth, but it's this untapped potential of a person who wasn't the best 3-point shooter, but has that potential. He has games where he goes 6 for 9, others 1 for 7. But it's his kind of effort level. And for a 6'7" kind of guard, the guy is a 45-inch vertical. How do you not love a guy who can jump out of the gym? So Cole Rosario, I think starting early, I like it. Let him kind of learn into the Big 12 play. Bill Self said he's built physically for Big 12 play, but scoring wise for the Big 12 is a whole different story. So I like getting him in early. A lot of these tough non-conference games, but Rosario is really the player that Kansas is, I think, for an actual deep run in this year, is a guy who's going to have to step up. And I'm going to shout out OTE. OTE, they've done an excellent job, and we have to shout them out because Kansas is using it as a pipeline. We'll call it the OTE Jayhawks pretty soon.
So the other two guys that I know on this roster are, of course, Elmarko and Jamari McDowell, who ideally are just depth guards to have, who understand the system and can defend. Is there a chance that Elmarko is closer to the player he was supposed to be coming in this year?
So, I think a patellar tendon injury is such a tough one to predict. How can you not see that injury and the impact and think that guy probably lost a step? And I got to go off my guy, Bill, but, who knows? Every summer, Bill says he's been really working on it. Zach Clemens has really had a great summer and doesn't play more than a minute. He said Elmarko attacked this, rehabilitation, and he absolutely dominated, kind of similar to like Brandon Rush back in the day. So, he was a McDonald's All-American. Can't take that away from him. And he really lost his spot because he just didn't have confidence level. He was, a great defensive asset, but he just didn't have his shot. And that whole Kansas team didn't have a shot really. And Elmarko, I think he'll reclaim some of that. And I think he'll have to exceed his freshman year. He just didn't play well enough to his expectations, but he'll get his confidence. He's going to keep most of that athleticism, but I think Bill will still ease him into the system maybe, but he's a guy who's spent 3 years now in Bill Self's system of, quick cutting, just a basketball guru and genius in him. So you can pick up so much. And then another guy who spent that many years is Jamari McDowell. And it may, in his personal career, might hurt him. This is a team where, he might just be depth. He might not contribute. But one thing he is going to bring is a little bit of veteran leadership. He redshirted last year, and he easily could have played. I mean, we were watching the same team. There's no way you can tell me that, Jamar McDowell couldn't have added a spark off the bench when Ryland Griffin wasn't doing anything, or AJ Storr was playing as poorly as he was. So, I just think he's going to be the veteran leadership that he has to be for being a redshirt sophomore as the age of a junior. But he's a stable guard, very good defender, an adequate shooter, and Bill loves putting guys in the doghouse. Jamari will be going in for anyone who does something wrong in the doghouse. Jamari's jumping into the first thing he's got, and he's going to eat those minutes very well. And I do love the guys that we do have returning for this roster.
Do you expect anyone that we haven't mentioned yet to be in the rotation, whether it's Calderon from Brazil or Nginyu Nagala from Canada? If I'm saying that
I couldn't get it much better. We call him G. That's according to Bill Self. We call him G. But the contributions and effectiveness, no guarantees. I think Samis Calderon, I think he's a candidate for redshirting, but I wouldn't. He's a talented player. He's a 4-star that has, a 7'3" wingspan, a 6'8" player that we're going to need height and depth this year. And Bill said the only thing with him is he needs it to translate from the drills to the game. I just don't think he has quite the basketball presence. He was an NBA Latin America Academy player. Hasn't been playing ball his entire time, but he's another OTE guy. Played with Cole Rosario last year. Played with Bryson Tiller. That's at least help. He's been around, these guys, has some confidence, but Samis, he's going to be maybe 2 to 4. And if he really can show something in those limited minutes, he'll help. And Giangala is our Diggy Coet. David Coet from last year, he's the veteran guard, undersized, 5'10", and Bill says the best to himself, he's an insurance policy. If Melvin Heck goes down or, Darryn Peterson, is lingering, G is going to run that offense. He'll facilitate, and the offense won't lose a step. he's one of our better 3-point shooters as well. The problem is it's Canada. And I don't know about you, but I'm not, strictly watching Dalhousie University games, and that's where he's playing. So, we can look at his statistics, and I'm going to take away that he's played a lot of basketball. He had offers to go to other schools that he could have played a lot more, and he could have also gone overseas, and he chose Kansas Jayhawks and Bill Self. So, insurance policy, but potential couple of minute, helps the offense when they need it spark.
Dalhousie University, go Tigers.
Yeah, of course. When in doubt.
So, Nick, the next thing I want to ask you is,
Mm-hmm.
with so many legendary coaches pulling the plug in just a couple of down years for Bill, where do you think he's at? How important is this year for him in just this program? Like, does Darryn being God and this is a Final Four team and the transfers click, like, give him new life and extend his tenure? And if it doesn't work out and this is a 6 or 7 seed that doesn't make the Sweet 16, what does that mean for Bill? How are you kind of looking at it? Is this a huge year for just kind of his future in this program?
Yeah. The biggest question mark, I would say, besides Darryn Peterson's potential is Bill Self. Back in July, he had a 2-day hospital stint for his heart again. We all remember a couple years ago, the Arkansas game,
Yeah,
where he couldn't show up. He couldn't coach. And, we need a general manager. There's something that has to happen for another role that, needs to help out these older coaches. You're seeing them step down right before the season. Tony Bennett, Bruce Pearl recently. These guys are stepping down, and 2 big down years for Kansas Jayhawks. And what does he do? He hires an associate head coach for the first time in his tenure in an interior promotion in Jeremy Case. And, he said this was expected to be announced last spring, but it's interesting timing, to say the least. And he, in his presser, when it happened, he said, he's a great coach. He will be a great head coach one day. He didn't say here. He didn't say in waiting. And Bill's changed his kind of outlooks from every 5 years, how am I doing, to every 2 to 3. And this is that third year of that, 2 to 3 year increment. And I think if this doesn't go well, if this blows up, I wouldn't be surprised that this could be one of Bill Self's last years. I think he's got too good of a recruiting class kind of next year. And I kind of said the same thing about going into this year. He had too good. You can't turn away Darryn Peterson. I don't think you can turn away Talon Kinney, Javon Bardwell, a couple of guys that, we'll remember next year. But it's too good of a class to turn away from, too good of returners potentially with, who knows, even Flory might not go, Cole Rosario. I see, a couple years, Kansas is going to be knocking on the door saying, Bill, we gave you that lifetime deal, but the transfers aren't hitting and we are not getting to the Elite Eight anymore even. And we're in 6th year after year in a very tough conference. But Kansas Jayhawks fans, we're going to give the greatest coach in national, college basketball, we're going to give him as much time as he needs to figure this out, because we can't be ungrateful for what he has done. And that is, a couple banners.
Last thing before I get you out of here, one final just pitch for the best case scenario of this team around Darryn Peterson. Paint the picture to me of Bryson, Cole, all these guys hitting.
I will set the stage. It is a Darryn Peterson becoming the 5th freshman to win the Big 12 Player of the Year, joining the likes of Kevin Durant. It is us beating a Houston team in the Allen Fieldhouse in one of our 5th to last games and finishing off the season strong, going 28-3. That is our best case scenario. It is too hard of a non-conference schedule. We play UConn, Duke, UNC, Missouri, a bunch of away games. It's too difficult. Allen Fieldhouse has shown that it's not the easiest place to play in over the years. We've had some big losses, but our best case scenario is Darryn Peterson wins Player of the Year. He's in the Naismith finalist, Player of the Year conversation. He's putting up over 20 points a game. Flory is going to look as a clear lottery, but if not first round pick, which is unfortunate long term, but that's the kind of production you need out of your number 2 player. That pick and roll is simply unstoppable. And Cole Rosario, Jaden Dawson, Trey White are contributing at 35% or above from the 3-point line with, a couple of 8 to 12 point games to really complement Darryn's 20. Because I think, Bill Simmons kind of said it best, and, you always take him with a grain of salt sometimes, is Cooper Flagg had some 30-point games last year that were great and they were quiet. Darryn Peterson is going to have some loud performances. He's going to have 35-point games. that he lets everyone hear about it. A big slam that kind of creates a big turnaround in the game. So this team will live and die by Darryn Peterson, and I'm confident to say he will be the number one overall pick next year. And the Kansas Jayhawks will be going to at least the second weekend of the college basketball tournament this year, which we have not done in 2 years. So top 3 in the conference, I'd love that finish. But Kelvin Sampson said it himself, this is a tough league, and we came in and almost lucked into 2 championships. So we'll see how it pans out. But Darryn Peterson is the Kansas Jayhawks for the 2025-26 season.
There you have it. Nick, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you, Christian. Appreciate it.